You knew before you clicked, not suspected, not hoped, knew in that specific, slightly uncomfortable way of knowing something your mind has not yet fully permitted itself to officially acknowledge, where the knowledge lives in the body rather than in the thought, where it sits in the chest or the stomach as a warmth or a weight or a particular quality of aliveness that surfaces whenever a specific person enters your awareness. That person, the one who just crossed your mind, they are the reading. I am not going to pretend this opening is accidental. The title of this reading is doing something unusual. It is pointing directly at your own knowing rather than at information I am bringing you from outside. Because the information you most need right now is not new information. It is permission. Permission to trust what you already know. Permission to stop organizing what you feel into something more manageable, because the full-size version of it has been sitting in territory that felt too exposed to fully inhabit. Permission to let the knowing be the knowing, because on the other side of this reading, someone is running out of the capacity to maintain a silence that has been costing them more than they anticipated when they started maintaining it. And you already know who that is. Let me describe what I am seeing. Because the image is not abstract and its specificity is the point. Someone sitting in silence, not the comfortable silence of someone at rest, the effortful silence of someone who is containing something with active, sustained, daily effort. The kind of silence that has muscles in it, that requires continuous renewal, because the thing being silenced does not quiet on its own and does not diminish with time and does not become easier to contain as the containing goes on. It becomes harder. And what I am reading in this person's energy right now is that the containing has reached a threshold, not a crisis, not a dramatic breaking point where something shatters beyond recovery. The quieter, more inevitable threshold of someone who has simply run out of the specific resource required to maintain a particular effort indefinitely, who has been making the same withdrawal from the same account every day for long enough that the account is nearly empty. The silence is nearly spent. What will come out when it finally breaks is not messy or unpredictable or the product of an overflow that bypassed their judgment. It is everything they have been choosing daily not to say. Organized, considered, ready. I want to speak to the specific quality of this silence, because silence is not a single thing, and the kind I am reading carries information about the person keeping it. This is not the silence of indifference, not the silence of someone who does not know what they feel or has not yet arrived at any conclusion about you or this connection. Indifferent silences are light. They carry nothing. They rest easily on people who have nothing pressing against the inside of them. This silence is heavy. It has weight because of what it is containing. And what it is containing is not uncertainty. That is the crucial thing. What it is containing is certainty. A very specific, very settled, very long established certainty about you and what they feel and what they want and what they have been unable to find a way to say without everything changing. The silence exists because saying it changes everything. And they have been every single day choosing the version of things in which nothing changes over the version of things in which everything does. That choice is ending. I want to describe what has been happening underneath the silence in the most recent weeks, because something has shifted, and the shift is what has finally made the silence unsustainable. They saw something, or heard something, or experienced something so precisely in the frequency of you that it produced a response disproportionate to whatever triggered it. something small and completely ordinary that should not have landed the way it landed. That should have passed through their awareness like any other piece of daily experience, and instead hit something in them that did not absorb it cleanly. It landed and stayed, and in the staying of it, something clarified, not about what they feel, that has been clear for a long time, about the cost of continuing to hold this in the private space of their own interior indefinitely, about whether the arrangement they have been maintaining, where the feeling exists fully on their side and not at all in the space between you, is actually serving anything that justifies its cost. They concluded it is not. The conclusion is new even if the feeling behind it is not. And conclusions, once reached, tend to produce movement. A person can sit in feeling indefinitely. They cannot sit in a conclusion forever. A conclusion is pointed. It has a direction, and the direction this conclusion is pointed is toward you and toward the end of the silence. They concluded it is not. The conclusion is new even if the feeling behind it is not. And conclusions, once reached, tend to produce movement. A person can sit in feeling indefinitely. They cannot sit in a conclusion forever. A conclusion is pointed. It has a direction, and the direction this conclusion is pointed is toward you and toward the end of the silence. I want to describe what the days since this conclusion have looked like for them. Because the conclusion producing the movement has not meant the movement is immediately visible. What I am reading is someone who is in the preparation stage, who has made the internal decision and is now working through what the external expression of it looks like, running through scenarios, testing language in their own mind, finding and discarding approaches that feel either too much or not enough, or that fail to carry the actual weight of what needs to be communicated. This preparation is the specific, painstaking work of someone who understands that what they are about to offer is significant and who is treating it with the seriousness that significance deserves. They are not going to fumble this. They have been too careful with it for too long to allow the actual delivery of it to be careless. What you receive when the silence finally breaks is going to have been thought about in detail, with care, with the specific quality of attention that you deserve and that they have been privately giving to the question of how to say the true thing in the way it most deserves to be said. Let me speak to what you know, because the title says you already know who this is, and I want to honor that. There is a specific person whose name or face arrived in your awareness at some point in the reading of these first paragraphs, maybe at the very beginning, maybe when I described the effortful silence, maybe when I talked about the weight of containing certainty, maybe at some other specific phrase that hit differently from the rest because it matched something you have been observing in a particular person without explicitly naming what you were observing. That arrival was not random. Your perception has been tracking this person in the specific, largely subconscious way that Virgo perception tracks things. It has identified as significant without always flagging the tracking consciously. You have been accumulating evidence, noticing things that did not quite fit the explanation available for them, registering moments of something beneath the surface of ordinary interaction that your social intelligence organized into something appropriate and your actual intelligence filed separately. The filing system has a name in it, and it matches the name that crossed your mind. I want to speak directly to the quality of the relationship that exists between you and this person, not the official version, the actual one. The one that lives in the space between what is acknowledged and what is felt. There is a texture to your interactions with this person that is different from your interactions with others. Not dramatic, not obvious enough to have required direct address. Subtle in the way that significant things are often subtle. A particular quality of attention that flows between you that is not entirely accounted for by the ostensible nature of whatever connection you share on the surface. When they look at you, they hold eye contact slightly longer than the situation technically requires. When you speak, they listen with a quality of attention that is not simply polite, it is specifically focused, oriented, the kind of listening that comes from someone for whom what you say is genuinely and particularly important rather than just interesting in the general way that other people are interesting. When you are in shared spaces, they are aware of you in a way that goes beyond normal social awareness. They know where you are in a room. They track the edges of your presence without appearing to track it. And they manage the distance between you with a care that is too deliberate to be unconscious. You have noticed all of this, filed without labeling. The label is what this reading is providing. You have noticed all of this, filed without labeling. The label is what this reading is providing. And I want to add something to the behavioral observations because there is one more that I feel specifically and that I think will land with a particular kind of recognition for those of you whose knowing has been sitting in this territory. There are moments where they almost say it not dramatically, not in a way that produces obvious tension or a visible struggle, in the quieter way of a sentence that starts and then redirects at the last moment, a moment where their expression changes briefly before being managed back to neutral. A beat of silence at the end of a conversation that had a quality of there is something else before one of you moved the interaction forward. You have noticed those moments too. Notice them and graciously let them pass without making them an issue, because making them an issue would have required you to be more explicit about what you noticed than the situation at that point invited. Those moments were not nothing. Each one was an approach to the threshold that did not quite make it. What is coming is the approach that does this feel like someone specific right now? Not a guess, a knowing. The specific person whose behavior, in the context of what I have just described, suddenly reads as something other than what you have been explaining it as. Tell me in the comments what you feel as you sit with this, not who. Just whether something is clarifying in you right now that has been slightly blurry until this moment. I want to know how this lands. Let me speak to the breaking of the silence. Because it is coming and the form it takes matters for how you receive it. It will not arrive as a dramatic declaration in a public moment, not as the kind of confession that requires an audience or that has been staged for maximum impact. What I am reading has a quieter quality than that. The specific, intimate quality of something that has been held privately, finally being offered privately, in a moment that belongs to the two of you rather than to a performance of feeling for an external witness. It will feel like being led into something. The specific sensation of someone lowering a wall you did not know was up, not removing it entirely, not the kind of openness that happens when walls are absent to begin with, but the conscious, deliberate choice to lower something that has been maintained between you and to let you see what has been on the other side of it. What is on the other side of it is considerable, and they have been protecting it not because it is fragile, but because its value to them is high enough that handing it over required more certainty than they had until recently, more certainty about the moment, about the form, about whether the version of you who receives this is the same version who has been the subject of the containing. They have reached that certainty. The wall is coming down. I want to address something that I feel is present in the energy of several of you receiving this reading. A specific protective skepticism that has been earned through prior experience of misreading situations that looked similar to this one, of having been certain of a mutual feeling that turned out to be asymmetrical, of having allowed what you knew to expand into something that the situation did not ultimately support. That skepticism is not wrong. It developed in response to real experience, and it has served a real protective function. I am not going to ask you to abandon it or override it or decide that this time is different and simply trust. What I am going to offer instead is a reframe. The skepticism is appropriate when applied to your interpretation of someone else's feelings, when asking whether what you sense in another person is real or projected, when questioning whether your perception is accurate or influenced by your own wanting. But in this case, the question is not whether you are accurately reading something in this person. The question is whether you are permitting yourself to trust what you are accurately reading. Because I do not feel in your energy around this person the particular quality of someone who is projecting. I feel the particular quality of someone who has been correct but has been managing the correctness into something smaller, because certainty without confirmation feels dangerous. You are correct. The confirmation is arriving. I want to speak to something about what this changes for you, not just the relationship, what it changes in the way you understand the recent past. Because when someone's silence breaks and what was in the silence becomes clear, it retrospectively rewrites the history of the silence. Every interaction you had with this person during the period they were containing this takes on a different quality. In hindsight, every exchange that seemed ordinary reveals itself to have been happening on two levels simultaneously. Every moment of that particular attention, that specific quality of how they engaged with you, becomes legible in a new way. You are going to go back through certain memories and understand them differently. Not all of them, but specific ones. The moments where something was almost said and then wasn't. The exchanges that ended at a slightly strange point, as though there was more to be said, and the decision was made not to say it. The silences within conversations that carried a weight that seemed disproportionate at the time. All of that was the containing. And when the containing ends, you will understand those moments for what they were, which is not nothing, which is the evidence of someone who cared enough about what they felt to manage it carefully rather than spilling it at the wrong moment and under the wrong conditions. The care in the containing is itself information about the quality of what is being contained. Let me come to the close of this reading with something I want you to hold after it ends. Your knowing is accurate, not the managed version of it, not the version that has been amended to protect you from the risk of being more certain than the available evidence officially warrants. The actual knowing, the one that has been present in your body around this person as a warmth or a weight or that particular quality of increased aliveness that arrives when they enter your awareness. That knowing has been matching something real on the other side, not almost, not approximately, exactly. And the person on the other side of it has been holding something that matches the knowing with the same precision. Two people who have been in possession of the same truth about the same connection without having said it to each other. The saying is coming, not because I have described it to you, not because you will now watch for it and your watching will somehow produce it, but because it was already in motion before this reading existed. Already building toward the threshold I described at the beginning. Already approaching the end of the silence's capacity to maintain itself against what is pressing against its inside. You did not need this reading to know. You needed this reading to stop second guessing what you already know. Stop second guessing it. You did not need this reading to know. You needed this reading to stop second guessing what you already know. Stop second guessing it. And I want to say something specific about the second guessing itself because I think it deserves to be addressed directly before we close. The second guessing has not been a failure of perception. It has been the natural protective response of someone whose perception is very good and who understands that very good perception can also produce very convincing projections when the stakes are high enough. You have been second guessing not because you doubt yourself in general, but because in this specific situation, with this specific person, the wanting is real enough that you have not wanted to trust a knowing that might be serving the wanting rather than the truth. That is not paranoia. That is wisdom. But the knowing in this case is not serving the wanting. It is tracking the truth. And the difference, which you will be able to feel in retrospect very clearly once the silence breaks and the truth is confirmed, is that the knowing never changed shape based on what you hoped. It did not expand when you felt hopeful or contract when you felt cautious. It simply sat there, consistent and specific, and pointing at the same person through every variation in your own mood and circumstances. Things that are real stay consistent. This one has stayed consistent. That is the knowing. The knowing is right. And what it is pointing at is real and approaching and already more certain than the silence has been allowing you to believe.